Er ég búin að...
Góðan daginn, verið velkomin í þessa útsendingu af Hrafnaþingi Náttúrufræðistofnunar Íslands. Erindið í dag er flutt á Akureyri í starfsstöð Náttúrufræðistofnunar á Borgum á Norðurslóð. Í dag ætlar Pavel Vasovic, grasafræðingur hjá Náttúrufræðistofnun Íslands, að fjalla rannsóknir sínar á útbreiðslu stafafurunar í Steinadal í Suðursveit. Gjörðu svo vel, Pavel.
Tack fyrir. Good afternoon. I will be speaking English during this lecture. And today I would like to say a few words about our research that we were carrying out last summer in Steinadal in southeastern Iceland. To start with, I would like to stress that the results I will be presenting are a product of a teamwork, and apart from me, there are several other researchers that took part in this project, and I think that they certainly deserve mention and recognition. This is Gudrun Óskarsdóttir from Náttúrustofa Austurlands, and Gudrun Gísladóttir and Þóra Ellen Þorhaldsdóttir from the University of Iceland. The research we made was funded by a grant that Icelandic Institute of Natural History received from Kvistgerðasjóður, and we are also very grateful for that. So let us start with some basic facts about the lodgepole pine, Pinus contorta, or stafafuru in Icelandic. The genus Pinus or Pinus, belonging to family Pinaceae, originated in Mesozoic. That was about 180 million years ago, and it happened before the separation in Laurasia that gave birth to the Eastern North America and Western Europe. Then, some 150 million years ago, the genus underwent diversification into two major clades, namely the subgenus Pinus and subgenus Strobus. Life history evolution in pines has taken two different pathways that have reduced close competition with fast-growing angiosperms. One of these adaptive pathways was connected with shift towards the abiotically stressful environments, and another toward the fire-disturbed environments. And the adaptive models largely follow the subgenetic split between the subgenus Strobus and subgenus Pinus. Most lodgepole forests in North America, lodgepole pine forests in America, were established because of fire, in particular in the Rocky Mountains. As a result, in areas prone to fires, lodgepole pines typically bear serotinous cones. Why? Because there is a resin that seals the serotinous cones scales, and they are just shut, and this resin must be melted to open the cones and let the seeds free. So the forest fires provide the high temperatures that cones need to release the seeds. And one of the reasons why the natural forests in North America are very dense, and they cover significant areas of land, is that these forests underwent sort of a fire cycle. So we have like a lodgepole pine growing, then it's growing, and it's the biomass it's increasing. Then at some point we have a forest fire. Then the seeds from the serotinous cones are released. Also, the ideal soil conditions are created for the new plants to grow, and this increases the extent and density of lodgepole pine. This in turn produces more seeds. Then we have more fuel for the next fire cycle, and this cycles repeat itself and helps the lodgepole pine to establish itself on a wider area. Lodgepole pine has evolved into several highly differentiated by interfertile geographic races. There are 3 or 4 main subspecies that are recognized, and they can also be recognized not as subspecies but also as varieties. And these are Pinus contorta, subspecies contorta, which is growing mainly close to the seashore. Then we have subspecies bollanderi, which is also treated as a synonym under Pinus contorta, subspecies contorta. Then we have a subspecies murrayana, growing in the south west of the United States, and and the most extensively distributed continental interior race, which is named Pinus contorta subspecies latifolia, and it's marked here in green. When we look at the distribution of the species worldwide, we can see that it has been introduced to Europe, South America, New Zealand, and even Australia. Sorry for that. In many places, the lodgepole pine became invasive, and the species currently classified as one of the most invasive conifers in the world. The species clearly possess a very wide ecological amplitude, and it's well adapted to survive and reproduce even in very harsh environments. In natural range, Pinus contorta grows from near the sea level up to 3,300 meters altitude, and from mild and cool conditions close to the Pacific coast up to the cold and continental interior of the Rocky Mountains. In its native range, it can tolerate temperature from about -57 to +38, and annual precipitation from 250 to 500 millimeters. In native settings, the species grows in a wide variety of topographic conditions. Thank you. From flat areas to steep slopes and rocky ridges, it can tolerate a wide spectrum of soil conditions, capable of growing in any type of substrate, including both dry and wet, fertile and poor soils, and it can even grow on bare gravel. As I said, the lodgepole pine has been classified as one of the most invasive conifers in the world, and but I'm not gonna enlarge on that today because I've already did that during my lecture on 29th of October. So if someone is interested about these things, then please refer to this lecture from October, which is available on YouTube. Now, a few words about the area. When the Steinadal is located in southeastern Iceland, as I said before, in Suðursveit region, and it has cool and wet climate. As we can see, the average precipitation sums are exceeding 100 millimeters per month during most of the year. Average temperature stays above 0 degrees during the whole year, but the frostless period lasts just from June to September. When we look at this map showing ecological diversity of the area, we can easily notice that Steinadal is not very diverse. It's very diverse in terms of ecological diversity, so the habitat diversity. The bottom of the valley is shaped by river Kaldakvísl, and it's filled with coarse gravels and stones. This part of Steinadal is largely deprived of any vegetation, or maybe continuous vegetation cover, because of the unstable nature of the river, which changes its course very often and shows significant changes in the discharge over the year. Slope of the surrounding mountains are covered by a birch forest to the elevation of about 200 meters. And the higher parts of the slopes are usually covered by sort of heath vegetation, which is also present in lower parts of the valley that is not covered by the birch forest. This is one of the reasons why Steinadal is so interesting, since it can offer us a view into interactions between lodgepole pine and Icelandic nature and create an opportunity to study the species performance in a variety of different habitats that are common across Iceland. So that is why this study, in our opinion, has a fairly high predictive power in terms of showing what the future scenarios for lodgepole pine could be here in Iceland. So let us start now with our results, and I would like to start with the changes in the area colonized by lodgepole pine. And we did a sort of systematic survey of the whole valley last summer, and we spent about 30 working hours during this task. This is an enormous area, so to walk, well, the whole valley bottom and then the slopes, it takes a lot of time. And the systematic search was aimed to approximate the total area of the present spread of Pinus contorta. Since this area has increased enormously since the last research that was made in 2010, and since we were unable to visit every single square meter of the valley during just the 30 hours, then, well, because and some places are difficult to access, of course, and things like that, then we should treat the results that I'm presenting here as a estimate of the present total area that is occupied by the lodgepole pine. Now a few words about how we approach the problem. We use the minimum bounding geometry algorithm that is implemented in QGIS to calculate the convex hull, which covers the whole layer extent for each dataset. So, for example, they're connected in 2010. So we have all the pines that are connected in 2010 that are closed in a geometry, and then again in 2021 we closed all the lodgepole pines that we recorded in 2021 in one geometry, and the area of resulting polygons was used as an approximation of the area colonized by lodgepole pine, Pinus contorta. Now we can see the results of this research task. The initial area occupied by lodgepole pine plantation was 0.024 kilometers squares. In 2010, the total area colonized was 0.25 kilometers squares. And our estimation from last year gave a result of 2.4 kilometers square. So this is an order of magnitude difference just in a decade or so. We fitted the data into two models, the linear and exponential, and results showed that the exponential model had a better predictive power in this case. Let us now look at the situation in the field. We are now in the northwestern part of the area occupied by the lodgepole pine. We can see here that young plants are very effectively colonizing the slopes. And they are here. And the path of lodgepole pine ingression is also very easily visible with taller trees to the right. Now we can see how the situation looks like on the river gravel. So even though the total vegetation cover here is very scarce, the lodgepole pine is doing well and creating quite dense populations. So this is more or less the point here on the map. And on this picture, the last picture, at this time, we can see situation in the eastern border of the area colonized by lodgepole pine. The density is greatly reduced but first colonizing plants are already visible here in the front. Another question we asked was about the speed of spread of the species. And in order to do that, we draw a line using most distant points with confirmed presence for lodgepole pine from original plantation during the research made in 2010 and in 2021. Then we converted these lines into points that were situated 1 meter apart, and we calculated the shortest distance between point pairs. The results are as follows. The spread was initially around 10 meters per year. This is from the beginning of plantation to the year 2010. But during the last decade, the spread of lodgepole pine accelerated significantly, and in some directions, it reached over 100 meters per year, as is evidenced here on this graph. And the same increasing pattern can be seen in elevation change. So originally, the highest place where the species grow in plantation was 70 meters above sea level. Then in 2010, it was 116 meters above sea level, and last year 170 meters above sea level. So that's a significant increase. And here is a picture to give you an idea how far up the slope the lodgepole pine can reach. This is, I think that was the tree that was the highest tree we found. But of course, it's very difficult to reach some of the areas here, and we are aware of that probably there is a lot of small plants somewhere here that we couldn't even record it, because then the time needed to find all those plants would be much longer. The second question was about the changes in lodgepole pine density. In total, we examined 22 transects. 2 transects that were not properly positioned during the research in 2010, that were not parallel to other transects, were excluded from the present research. Each transect was 2 meters wide and was divided into 10 meters long sections. Each plant of lodgepole pine was located with GPS device. Its height was measured, and the presence or absence of cones was recorded. In addition, the total percentage vegetation cover was recorded for each transect section. And here a map to show how these transects were positioned in the field. It's good to realize that the lodgepole pine is present in every place around this plantation. So not only here when the transects are, but also here, and you can even see the small dots here. This is all the lodgepole pine. But only for these transects here, the data from 2010 were available. So therefore, we focused our efforts on this area. So we didn't establish any additional transects, because our aim was to show a change in time, not only to document the situation right now. Here we have a map showing the changes in the lodgepole pine density during the last decade. In blue, we have density from 2010 along each transect. In orange, a density from 2021. As you can see, the highest density recorded in 2010 was 0.6 plants per square meter, while the highest density now was 6.15 plants on each square meter. So a significant increase can be seen in formation of very dense stands that are very typical for lodgepole pine. As I mentioned before, this is something very typical for lodgepole pine, that when it grows just by itself, then it creates a really extremely dense stance. How does it look in the field? 2 photographs. Here we have an example of a place with fairly low density. We can see plants here and there. This is like the beginning of the colonization process. While here we have an example of high density of lodgepole pine and our transect here. And here both very young and a bit taller plants can be visible on this picture. Surprisingly, when we compared average plant diversity across all transects, we found that it's also best explained by an exponential model. So not only the total area occupied by lodgepole pine is changing according to exponential model, but also an increase in average tree density along all the transects is best explained by an exponential model. Now, a few words about total number of trees. We just counted the total number of trees in the transects in 2010 and now in 2021. And we can see that situation here is quite similar. We have a very steep growth with an order of magnitude increase during the last decade. In 2010, in all those transects we checked, it was 300 and something, between 300 and 400 plants at that time. Now the number of plants was well over 3,000. So this is a very steep growth with an order of magnitude increase, and is also best explained by the exponential model. So what can be expected in the nearest future? Well, it seems that we are somewhere here now at this point. Then the lodgepole pine will of course continue to produce offspring in huge numbers until every possible site available for colonization will be occupied. And then the number of trees will stabilize at some point. But this is extremely difficult to predict when and at what number of plants this curve will finally stabilize, but it will. So the same pattern of increase following this sigmoidal function is also present in many different invasive alien species around the world. We were also curious whether there is any relation between the vegetation cover and the density of lodgepole pine. And this graph shows that based on our data, no such relationship exists. So there is, we cannot say that, for example, the lodgepole pine is colonizing better in places that are deprived of vegetation, or maybe in more vegetated areas. It's just there is no such connection between these two variables. But of course, it's clear from our observation in the field that the lodgepole pine is so efficient a colonizer that it can establish itself also in a birch forest with a dense vegetation cover. And we can see a plant here, and this is not the only plant that we recorded in Steinadal growing in the birch forest. The last question I would like to discuss today is the impact of the lodgepole pine on vascular plant diversity. And we did it using the vegetation plots. The vegetation plots, we used the same set of vegetation plots as during the research in 2010, and it was 50 by 50 centimeters plots. In addition, we added random places within lodgepole pine plantation and random places within birch forest that is east from the plantation. In total, we examined a set of 30 sites in terms of this vegetation analysis I will be showing now. Here we can see the results of multidimensional scaling made on the matrix that was containing the information on species found in our plots and the cover, so the percent cover in each plot. This is evident from these graphs that the pine plantation has a different species composition, and that both birch, forest, and heath are different in terms of species composition and cover. And when we take a look on this picture B, we can see that the lodgepole pine plantation is also characterized by a lower species number. As we can see here, we have 13 species, 12 species, and then this gradient is falling down. And here we have 3 or 2 species present in the plantation in Steinadal. When we take a look at species numbers that were obtained from direct observations and compare it between the 3 vegetation type, we can see that the pine plantation is always characterized by the lowest values, and these differences were statistically significant. Since many species will always remain unseen or undetected in a research like this, we used SPETS, pool, and speed vacuum functions from the vegan package implemented in R to ensure better estimates of the total diversity. And these functions uses some popular ways of estimating the number of unseen species and adding them to the observed species richness. And we used 4 different estimators of species species diversity: the S estimator, Chow estimator, first order jackknife, and bootstrap estimator. But in all cases, the curve showing the diversity of pine plantation was non-overlapping with other curves, what indicates significant difference in total species diversity. So what's the future scenarios for lodgepole pine here in Iceland? Well, the knowledge on species biology and ecology from North America can be certainly very helpful to draw such conclusions and to think about such scenarios. Lodgepole pine is shade intolerant and does not like the competitions from other species. Occasionally, seedlings of lodgepole pine can establish and persist under a forest canopy in some small gaps, but these individuals rarely survive in the nature. In spite of this shade intolerance, lodgepole pine can survive in excessively dense stands for very long periods, often for 50 years or more. Lodgepole pine typically regenerates after stand-destroying fires and develop even-aged and single of mixed species stands. So when we take into account, then we can see that the lodgepole pine can play 4 basic succession roles, and this is based on the research made in the North America. The minor role, dominant role, persistent, or climax. Because in Iceland, we haven't got any tree species, naturally occurring tree species that can outcompete the lodgepole pine in terms of the height of the growth. So there are no species that can create so much shade that the lodgepole pine will not survive under this shade. Then the most likely scenarios for Iceland will be that the lodgepole pine will create a persistent plant communities, and will be a dominant component of even-aged stands with little evidence of replacement by shade-tolerant species, or even can create a climax plant community. And this happens when lodgepole pine is the only tree species that is capable of growing in a particular environment. And in this case, lodgepole pine is self-perpetuating itself. And this is also very likely that this is something that we are heading for here in Iceland. More information about this the research I presented today will be available in a report that will be published, I think, within days, maybe later this week or early next week. So if someone is interested in these results and some more information and more in-depth reading about that, then please take a look on this report. And well, having said that, I would like to thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Takk fyrir þetta mjög áhugaverða erindi, Páll. Það var gaman að hlusta. Ég vil bara hvetja fólk að senda inn spurningar á YouTube-rásinni. Páll, getur þú svo sem bæði tekið við spurningum á ensku og íslensku, svoleiðis að ef það hentar eitthvað betur að skrifa á íslensku, þá gerið þið það bara, sjálfsagt mál. Meðan við bíðum eftir því að það 2 mínútna seinkun á milli þessari beinu útsendingu og því sem kemur fram á YouTube. Að meðan að við sjáum hvað gerist á YouTube, þá langar mig að minna á næsta hrafnaþing, en hún Ingibjörg Smáradóttir sem sérfræðingur hjá Vatnajökulsþjóðgarði ætlar að flytja fyrir okkur erindið Vatnajökulsþjóðgarður þróun og samstarf þann 7. apríl. og þar ætlar hún að kynna fyrir okkur sem sagt helstu þættina úr meistararannsókn sinni og hún heitir Tengslanet og samstarf í opinberri stjórnsýslu, stjórnsýsluleg staða og hlutverk Vatnajökulsþjóðgarðs. Svo ég hvet bara sem flesta að hlusta þá aftur 7. apríl. Meðan ég er svo kannski með eina spurningu til að byrja, Pavel, að þú endaðir líka á því að segja okkur að svona þessu möguleikum sem að geta orðið í þróun stafafurunar hér og auðvitað Steinadalur lítið rannsóknarsvæði. Hversu vel heldurðu að þú getur verið að spá fyrir í rauninni almenna útbreiðslu stafafuru? Þú veist, þetta nógu sambærilegt þetta rannsóknarsvæði við önnur svæði hérna á Íslandi?
Well, of course, it's a problem because there are different things that are playing a role here in the problem. How much of a predictive power this study can have. Well, of course, we need more research. But judging from the diversity of different habitats that are present in Steinadalur, that we have already checked during our research, well, I think that it has some significant predictive value. So because when we look at the huge variety of different habitats that can be easily colonized by the lodgepole pine, and these habitats are not only present in Steinadal but also in other places in Iceland, then one can assume that it's highly likely that when we are in other spot in Iceland and we have the same species in play, so the stafafuru or lodgepole pine, and similar environments or similar habitats, then they should be easily colonized. Of course, it's always question about the proper abiotic conditions, so the humidity and temperature and things like that. But of course, this is to be seen, and of course we need some more research. But I would say privately that I would say that this is, in my opinion, we have a quite predictive power in this research in Steinadalur.
Takk fyrir þetta, Pavel. Jón Gunnar einmitt hérna að spyrja á YouTube-rásinni hvort að þú teljir að stafafura sé að haga sér einmitt svipað alls staðar á Íslandi. Þú telur að þetta geti farið sem sagt töluvert eftir hitastigi þá líka á.
I don't know that. This is something that needs to be checked. If you want to have data like this one that is showing something, black on white, then of course we need more research. But well, it doesn't take a genius to, for example, to go here outside Akureyri to and see how the lodgepole pine is spreading there in, for example, in Thelamork, on both sides of the roads, close to the main road to Reykjavik. We can see lots of young trees. So probably the climatic conditions here are in place, and we can see that the species is spreading quite fast. Well, I don't have any numbers about that because then it needs again an hours and weeks or even months of research. But well, it's achievable.
Það rétt, þetta auðvitað hellingsvinna ef það ætti að fara að skoða þetta á mun fleiri svæðum, en væri mjög áhugavert að sjá einmitt hvort að við værum svo
breytingu. This is very time consuming. This is extremely time consuming research. Because if you want to really visit all to make these lines according to which you are the transects according to which you are checking, then it's a lot of searching for small plants, and well, this is really extremely time consuming.
Og því miður við bara eitt Pavel, svoleiðis að svolítið flöskuháls.
Já.
En hún Rannveig Magnúsdóttir, hún þakkar fyrir erindið líkt og Jón Gunnar gerir. Hún segir að þetta sé nú svolítið sláandi niðurstöður. Ekki kominn tími til að stafafuru verði skráð formlega sem framandi ágeng tegund á Íslandi, samanber varúðarregluna og áætlanir í skógrækt?
Well, this is not a question to me because I'm not the one who decides about putting plants on the list if it's invasive or not invasive. But well, my private opinion is that well, it's just invasive. I mean, according to the definitions one can find in the scientific literature or in some laws, then well, like for me privately, it's I'm just certain about that. So this is not a big deal for me privately to classify the lodgepole pine as invasive, at least based on this what I was showing to you.
Já, þetta býsna stóra spurningar að sitja hér og svara þessum skilgreiningum en alveg rétt mögulega þyrfti fara að taka þetta upp á stærri vettvangi. En ef að það ekki fleiri spurningar þá ætla ég bara að þakka þér kærlega fyrir, Pavel, og það verður gaman líka að sjá skýrsluna þegar hún kemur út. Hún hvet áhugasama líka þá að kynna sér hana, en annars
Hún kemur fljótlega.
Hún kemur fljótlega. En þá bara þakka ég kærlega fyrir erindið, þetta var ákaflega fróðlegt og eins og ég segi, næsta hrafnaþing verður 7. apríl þar sem að hún Ingibjörg frá Vatnajökulsþjóðgarði ætlar aðeins að fara yfir tengslanetið og samstarfið þar. Og þá bara þökkum við fyrir okkur.